we're still in clown shoes world.
We are?
Yes.
Oh.
Unfortunately, yes.
You'll tell me when we've been saved.
I'll tell you whenever we move out of that particular realm into something a bit more sane. But as of now, still, the clown shoes hasn't, and Neil's got his yet. Clown shoes hasn't stopped. It's getting worse, and Neil's got his Christmas sweater on. Let's go. If you're a fan of somebody called Brandon, I see. Yep, that's good.
Yeah. I
Let's
like the look,
go,
you know.
Brandon.
It, yeah, sounds good. It's kind of Christmassy now. It's a tradition at this point. It's a modern tradition, but it's tradition nonetheless. I think it's been 3 years. We can call it a tradition. Yeah, you know, getting in the festive spirit, which I'm not really feeling these days, but who is? Can't blame people for not.
I think there's a lot of people out there feeling festive.
Ah, stop.
I think there are, yeah.
Yeah.
I think
But
so.
they're trying to, but
Yeah.
do they really?
I don't know. Yeah, it's different maybe. Ignorance is bliss.
Things carry on by inertia too. But
What else are you going to do? Like, people aren't just going to stop. Like, something would have to interfere or intercede. But anyway, yeah. So, I don't think we're going to be too long today, because really there isn't very much that's new. But apart from what, like I said, just continued lies, manipulation, distortion of truth, clown shoes type stuff. That is amazing. That well, maybe a lot of people do see it. I don't know. Obviously, you have to be paying attention to actually see it, right? If a lot of people aren't paying attention, then they're not picking up on it. You know, they don't care. It's not their job. For most people, it's not their job to be kind of stewards of the planet in a certain sense, at least if only from an information point of view, you know, like to keep an eye on things and to participate in that way. Most people, that's not their job. That's not the social contract. Is government does that.
yeah, it's John Kerry's job.
Yeah, and we just get on with our lives. And so I think most people are still, and always have been, in that mode, you know. It's too much hassle to like pay attention to stuff and think about stuff, you know. They got enough on their plate, you know. Without having to do that as well, you know. So
Possible, well,
but
exception that proves the rule maybe, but some more riotous behaviour in Ireland this week. Can I cover that first?
yes, go ahead.
So, you remember there was a riot about 4 weeks ago in Dublin, Ireland, and Irish government and media told everyone internationally the story was a fringe far-right minority in Dublin had just gone mental and burned a few buses and cars down in the middle of Dublin City. And they were upset. Well, they kept this part on the QT, but they were upset because earlier that day there'd been a stabbing incident where it appears that a guy stabbed, well, it didn't appear, he stabbed several kids, 3 kids I think, and 2 adults, one of whom was a teacher and his caretaker. I think the update, no one died, but one of the children is still in intensive care, I think, possibly in a coma still. No one really knows because there's been absolutely no update on this. But there kind of was. There was alternative media, kind of like Ireland's Breitbart, Gripped Media, did have some info on this that initially gave us some, let's say, international traction. You probably heard about this, that they kind of ID'd the guy. And they did that on the basis of a leak from Irish police, the Gardaí, to them, that it was an Algerian immigrant. And they kind of gave some other data that suggested they could pinpoint who it was. And so they think they found him and so published what info they had, what's publicly available about this guy. It turns out to have been false. At least what happened next was the Irish police said, no, we never said that. And so Gript was forced to completely retract the whole story. And so officially at the moment, no one knows who did it. It was, and they didn't quite say it was not a foreigner or a, quote, naturalized Irish citizen. They didn't deny that it probably was of Algerian background, etc., etc. But they did specifically deny that they'd ever said to Gript who this person was. And then that was it. In the 4 weeks since then, there's been almost no official update on this. They had said they were waiting for him to get better in hospital, and apparently he is better now, to begin questioning him. That was about 2 weeks ago. Nothing. Anyway, you can see, right? This is this is why like people are angry. There's absolutely no talking. This is why people also come up with conspiracy theories, because they have to theorize about something. They're not getting information, not getting action. They're not getting. So it's inevitably erupting in other ways. Anyway, you remember the gist of it was, it's only a fringe. Don't worry about this. Europe, Washington, everything's fine here. No, really, it's just a few people. Well, 3 days ago, in a totally different city, really in the countryside outside the city of Galway in the west of Ireland, someone maybe locally announced, maybe the announcement came from Dublin, who knows, the following, that a hotel outside the city of Galway was to be used to house, quote, 70 male refugees, which immediately, yesterday, attracted a protest outside. In fact, the protesters immediately set up a checkpoint. They basically blockade. You couldn't get in or out of the driveway to this hotel. I don't know if there's any images there, but they chainsawed a couple of trees to make sure no one could get in and out of this. That's the picture of the hotel, or now former hotel. So that was yesterday, and things escalated very fast, because this morning I woke up to the news that the hotel was burned to the ground last night. You can play that there. It's the Ross Lake House Hotel in Galway. You can go ahead and play that. I think there's no sound in. Not sure. That's the annex to the back. That's definitely been torched to the ground. Don't know if the old building itself is gone, but it's just a 20-second clip of the footage. And now they have a serious pickle on that. I was like, yeah, so it's a fringe far-right minority, just, some yobs in Dublin and some locals out in the countryside in Galway. And also in the meantime, another place that was earmarked was a Leitrim village, another small rural place in the north of Ireland, north central. Another place that was earmarked there, massive protest and basically roadblocks. The people had a town's meeting and they set up their own roadblocks. They're not letting people come. Buses full of refugees / migrants come in. In addition, there was another one in Ballyshannon. That's in Donegal.
In the west, yeah.
The announcement that people would be housed in some maybe hotel or another facility was sparked a town meeting, and they said no fucking way. Local TDs, that's MPs, turned up to try and convince them, and they doubled down and no, it's not happening. So,
well, there's also the context of this is just throw up that link there, Scotty. Is this that we should remind people of back in this is May poll? Nobody's disputed it. 3 in 4 people believe Ireland is taking too many refugees. That's more than 6 months ago. The government was put on notice that a large majority of the population think there's too much refugee immigration, and government just went, screw you lot. Yeah. Which is happening a lot these days around the world. Governments seem to be, to the extent that a certain segment of the population actually have an opinion on something, the government just says, screw you.
The responses to this on social media are gold. This is the state broadcaster publishing the news today that the hotel was burned to the ground. If you go, maybe it won't appear the way I saw it, but if you scroll down, I think the first response, the first one. You never know when climate change is going to strike. What's that? First one.
Oh yeah, you never know when climate change is going to strike.
And there's more. There's like there's one further down. I think. Go ahead and scroll. Maybe you'll see it. It says, "I heard that building wasn't vaccinated." And there's another one that's like, "Hang on now. Putin must have had something to do with this." It's just like wall to wall, just. No one's saying anything. Now, there's going to be arrests. Surely there's photos of people who were organising the protest. They'll obviously be hauled in first. But what's interesting is the at least visibly here on X, on one social platform, the sort of overwhelming display of solidarity with, not with the act of doing something that's illegal, obviously, but the sentiment of
had this house been inspected by the fire officer, it seems it was unsafe.
yes, great responses. There's more, but there you go. It's great because it's not. Again, I don't want to act like I'm condoning this, but it's so symptomatic of it's great in that it completely blows away the narrative that they're pushing and pushing and doubling. It'll be interesting to see the response to this. Do you double down again and just go with far right fringe lunatic conspiracy? There's been a shift. It's the smallest shift, but it might be a crack into something that becomes much, much bigger. Sinn Féin leader, which is in theory, it's the anti-establishment populist movement party in Ireland, but there's a big catch in it. It's super lefty. I'm on board with the WEF and mass immigration and everything. Mary Lou MacDonald has said, maybe it's time to open up the national conversation about this issue.
Well, like I said, they already had it on a poll. 75%
right.
said too much, It's too much immigration. And it's obviously that narrative that it was the far right fringe, whatever, is not true because, again, that poll, and there's no reason to disbelieve it, 75% of the population, and this immigration has been going on for quite a number of years, and people have had enough of this excessive immigration into small Irish towns and cities not so much because it can be absorbed to a large extent, but obviously there's people in Dublin who are against that. But you get into smaller rural villages where you're really changing the demographic significantly. If you bring in only a few hundred people,
they become a minority.
Yeah, it's obviously. I mean, it may be it's obviously a small fringe, not of that opinion, but there's a small group of people who are willing to take to the streets and burn hotels and burn buses and stuff like that to make their point. Make their point heard, but when 75% of the population also agree that there's too much immigration, there's not going to be a lot of people amongst that 75% who, they might say, yeah, well, that's taking it a bit far or whatever, but the general sentiment of being stopping the levels of immigration is something we support. So the majority of people support something to be done to stop immigration.
Yeah, and not even stop it completely, just to have some
control over it. And if the government refuses to do it and says, well, they're just going to have to live, what's more or less said, you're just going to have to live with that, we're going to continue to bring in immigrants and tough shit to people, then there'll be more and more support for those kind of more militant actions, because that's the only thing that people are left with,
Yep.
There's,
those who make peaceful evolution impossible make violent revolution
exactly
inevitable.
It's true.
JFK.
This is just swinging to Ukraine for a second. The majority of Americans oppose more US aid for Ukraine in war with Russia. This is an article from CNN from August, but yet they double down on it, So it's like what people think apparently just is irrelevant, and that's always been the case. And governments have always, to a large extent, got around it. If they didn't like what people thought, then they would just kind of carry on and do what they wanted to do anyway. But that's a dangerous proposition to continue to do that when people start to really suffer in one way or another, and they haven't really started suffering to a significant degree in Western countries yet. But when they do, the government better think twice about just saying, well, sorry, but your suffering is just something you're going to have to learn to live with. At that point, then you get much larger protests and violence in the streets. When you push people to a limit. People are ambivalent.
Well, at the moment, at the moment they're sticking with gaslighting, which is sorry, you don't have a voice because you're only a minority, and that's kind of made people go, oh, it's the social proof issue. Maybe I am. Maybe it's me. Everyone else is fine with it. But as more and more evidence comes out that actually most people around see it as I do, that's not going to work anymore, and they'll have to adapt.
There's just wanted to talk about clown shoes and the nonsense that passes for official reality. Basically, I just came across a couple of articles, both in CNN, within a few days of each other. This one. It's on MSN, but carried from CNN. Russia has lost 80% of its troops it had prior to the start of the Ukraine war, according to U.S. intelligence assessment. Now, when you see according to U.S. intelligence assessment, generally speaking, that means it's a lie. But anyway, and we don't need to just assume that because it's obviously out of their own mouths, basically. But the interesting thing about it is that Russia has lost a staggering 80% of the total number of active duty ground troops it had prior to launching its invasion. Still, second paragraph, still, despite heavy losses of men and equipment, Russian President Vladimir Putin is determined to push forward. So even though he's only got 13% of his troops left, he's determined to push forward. That means he's going to fail, right? As it approaches his 2-year anniversary. A highly anticipated Ukrainian counteroffensive stagnated, blah, blah, blah. And the next paragraph, this assessment sent to Capitol Hill on Monday comes as some Republicans have balked at the US providing additional funding for Ukraine. Now, that's the money paragraph right there. That's why this headline is put out there. It's part of the Biden administration's, like we talked about in the last show, Biden administration's attempt to prevent Russia from doing what it very soon, relatively soon, is going to do anyway, which is actually, quote unquote, win or officially win in Ukraine, because that would look very bad for the Biden administration in an election year.
So this
they would be disqualified. Biden would lose next year's election before the campaigning had really even begun, if it turns out that he had presided over 2 years of losing basically, and pretending that he was winning.
So this is the CIA stepping in to say, hang on guys, we're winning.
Yes.
We're almost there. 87%, 13 to go. Give them the money.
Yeah. Except, now this is the amazing thing, and how people don't make any sense or have any faith in the media. The amazing thing is that, so that first article about that they'd lost 87% of their troops, it was 3 days. It was just 3 days ago. But in April this year, Russian ground forces are bigger today than at the start of the war in Ukraine, according to a US general, someone basically on the ground who maybe knows. But so you're expected to believe that, because it was Russia that. So what happened since April was that Ukraine has, since April this year, Ukraine has been steadfastly basically losing. That's when the losing really started taking over. Ukraine's losses and losing big time, losing bigly began because at that time there was going to be a spring counteroffensive. There was no spring counteroffensive. It had to go into a summer counteroffensive, and then the summer counteroffensive ended in them getting nowhere and being decimated. So in that period of time between April and today, you would assume that they lost more or less. Russia had to have lost, while it was winning, it lost 100% roughly of its ground forces.
2 questions. Is bigly now an official word in the English language?
I don't know. It might be. And the other thing, just another juxtaposition here, out of this, and this one's within a few days of each other. So it's the first one again, which is. Russia has lost 80% of its troops it had prior to the start of the Ukraine war, according to an intelligence assessment. And then, so look at the dates, December 12th, December 15th. On December 15th, 3 days later, Western officials warn Ukraine is certain to fail against Russia if US doesn't provide more aid. So how is Ukraine going to fail if Russia has only got 13% of its troops left?
I'll try and square it. Playing devil's advocate here. Russia has lost 87% of troops it had prior. They probably. Well, you tell me if I'm right. Do they mean that the troops they positioned, the 20,000 they positioned at the beginning, so February of 2022, 87% of the 115 are gone. But thanks to mass mobilization and reinforcements, they're still dominant in Ukraine. But 87% of 115,000 they're claiming 70,000, 80,000 deaths. Which is in the ballpark of what they have claimed.
No, well, it's not. No, it's at least twice as many than the Russians have likely lost. there's fairly accurate stats from relatively independent sources showing that the attrition rate or the kill rate between Russian and Ukrainian troops is somewhere has fluctuated somewhere between. But if you put it at 10-1, you wouldn't be far off.
Yes, that's in the real world. But in CNN/intelligence assessment /bullshit groupthink land, isn't there the figure they go with, like 500,000 Russian dead or something? Like they've convinced themselves. If you Google it and pull it up, the first return you'll get will be.
But that's just more
Russian,
lies. But that's just more lies, and it's exposed by the fact
this lie
that
is consistent with the lie factory overall picture they've been giving.
Except that's it's not. It's completely contradictory, because, like I just showed you on those two articles, I mean, how do you account for the fact they've lost? I mean. They've lost 87% of the troops. But what does that say? We're winning. They're losing. You know, and like even in the article, it said, despite this, Putin is determined to push ahead. Blah 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 blah. And then the CNN, the same news outlet, puts Western officials warn Ukraine is certain to fail against Russia if the US doesn't provide more aid. So, I mean, which is it? I mean, what are your headlines conveying here? Russia has lost 87%, but Putin's going to push ahead with this misjudged victory that he's getting, this ill-advised victory that he's going to have,
ill-judged victory.
And he's lost 80% of his troops. That's what people read from the headline. Then 3 days later, Western officials warn Ukraine is certain to fail. So how can the country?
I think it's what,
because if Ukraine is certain to fail, then Russia's certain to win, which means that Russia can't have lost 87% of its troops. And I mean, okay, maybe there's a technicality where if you look at the details, but the overall point of that is to try and present the image that Russia is losing, while at the same time your same outlet is presenting that it's Ukraine that's
because
losing.
You want to get this built. You want one last hurrah. You want one last push.
Yeah.
It's not a great push that you think will win the Great War. It's one last push for the armed contractors in Washington,
exactly,
and the kickbacks and so on.
It's that, and it's more than that. I think they're trying to find a way to keep it going, albeit on a very reduced scale, like the Ukrainian military keep it propped up, so that it appears, at least through next year, and this is the worst thing about it, is that they'll try and drag this on through next year, so that Biden doesn't appear to have lost a war.
Yeah. How do you create a reality within the greater actual reality that's imposing itself? It's going to get worse. The way they try to manage but they're going to get really creative as well. That's the thing you have to keep an eye out for. It'll be really flagrantly, obviously bullshit to us, but you know, it still has to be like countered, because people will be like, that seems contradictory, but I'll go with that. I mentioned last week that the IMF had forecast that Russia's growth this year would be 3%. Putin, for what it's worth, has said now it's looking to be 3.5%. Remember, it was supposed to contract by about 3%. So it literally went the opposite way. The Russian side, I don't know how much weight to give this. I ran it past you. You're like, yeah, whatever. They could be just, he may not be someone in the know. But the last time I remember something like this being mentioned by someone high up in the Duma, it did produce results. So someone on like the equivalent of a Russian Duma Defense Committee has said that a major offensive is coming. No shit. It's coming at some point in some form or another. But specifically, this is a named person, so not an anonymous source. Lieutenant General Andrei Gurulev, who sits on the Defense Committee in the Russian Parliament, says that Russia is preparing a major offensive against Ukrainian forces to be paired with a large-scale missile assault on the country's critical infrastructure. And that it's all not just, a general alert, but he says the breakthrough areas are identified in the governing documents. Our commanders know this thing well, blah, blah, blah. Of course, the usual caveat, where exactly and when is another question. So,
yeah, there's some...
Could be over winter. Winter obviously doesn't stop Russians from...
There's some... let me just look it up here. There's some... evidence that they're expecting that, of course, because if that's planned, if there is something along those lines, some kind of a, what we would expect that maybe some people would expect it long before now of Russia going in and just, taking bigly and taking Ukraine. The Chernihiv.
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 Oh, look at you, all up at the names.
Uh,
That's on Ukraine.
They've been fortifying that area. There's, recently in Chernihiv, which is basically
northeast.
Yeah, it's just above. The thing is, the interesting thing to me was that it's directly above Kiev. Along, so they've been fortifying the border because it's just above Chernihiv. There's the border with Belarus and Russia along there, and recently they've been adding extra fortifications along that border that Ukrainians have in order to, because maybe.
But that's the direction the Russians came in the first time.
Yes, as well, and it obviously would be the main way that you'd come via to get to Kiev. In the event of some major, attack on the infrastructure, some shock and awe type situation, and then some maybe when they've decided that there's really isn't much in the way of Ukrainian soldiers or manpower left to kind of to defend or to push back against, to provide any significant resistance, that they could just basically march into Kiev. I mean, so that's the scenario that a lot of people would have expected to see or hoped to see, maybe depending on your perspective.
You think you're predicting 2024? That's on the cards.
No, I'm just saying if that Russian politician dude who's saying that there's some major attack, that might be part of it. That it wouldn't just be a standoff, major missile barrage, but that it would be followed by like I said, what people claimed Russia should have done, or others were mocking them for not having done, which is just have all your Russian soldiers march across the country, take Kiev, kick Zelensky out, install a new government, and then take all of Ukraine, basically. Obviously not realistic, but it wasn't realistic 2 years ago. It's maybe a bit more realistic now.
And strategic air campaigns sounds like it could be euphemism for what Putin has been preventing them from doing so far, which is strictly limiting airstrikes to actual military hardware, personnel, etc. Strategic air campaign sounds more like disable the country's critical infrastructure in a big way, and then move in.
In advance of an actual invasion, like a proper invasion. And of course, yes, that would be much more plausible now, assuming that it's accurate that Ukraine has lost the significant, let's say, large majority of its fighting force, of its soldiers. That 600,000 that were built up a couple of years ago, NATO trained, that most of them are gone in terms of being either killed, missing, or injured, whatever, just no longer combat capable. So at that point, certain point, you think if this goes on a few more years and there's no more Ukrainian soldiers available, the Russians would decide, well, now's a good time to kind of just march into the country. We're only going to meet sporadic. We're not going to meet any resistance, really.
And before Poland gets there first?
Before Poland marches in first. They'll march in the west, yeah. If that happens, you'd have the Poles march into the west.
Putin did another marathon public presser. It's been a couple of years, actually, since he did it. Anything of note from that? I didn't watch the whole 4 and some hours. I love how the Western media is like, nothing to see here. It was all scripted. Very boring, actually. I literally saw one British tabloid report that nothing happened. Hello, context. What Western leader has ever done that? There were 2 million questions thrown in. I mean, well, there's a pool of 2 million questions. I suppose these things are more and more controlled. There were some messages that got up on screen bitching about the state of things in Russia and when are you going to fix this and that. Obviously, there's negative stuff too, and they capitalized on that. I mean, West would always be looking for the negatives in Russia. Yeah, it was interesting. It probably is not a free for all like it used to be. No, because they barely talked about Ukraine.
There was an interesting commentary after the fact. He gave a little short interview to RT, and he was asked about just about the Russian US in particular, or Russian Western relations, and he gave a a short description of his own naivety about the intentions of
Right.
of the West. You can have a listen here. It's not all of this video, it's just maybe the first minute or so. Go ahead.
Russia has no reason, no interest in going to war with NATO countries. We have no territorial claims against each other, no desire to spoil relations. We are interested in developing these relations. Here, they dragged Finland into NATO. Did we have any disputes with Finland? All disputes, including territorial ones in the middle of the 20th century, have long been resolved. We had good, cordial relations, economic ties were developing, there were no problems. And now there will be, because we will create the Leningrad military district and concentrate certain military units there. Why would they need this? That's nonsense. The same with other countries, including those from NATO. We have no problems with anyone. It is they who artificially create problems with us because they do not want to have Russia as a competitor.
All right, for further discussion.
Yeah, got that.
We should add that he's responding to Biden, who, as part of the pressure to get Congress to pony up, had just bullshitted everyone and said, if we don't give money to Ukraine now, Putin is going to win in Ukraine, and then he's going to invade NATO.
Well, he's speaking to there's another bit from him after that at about 2 minutes. We'll just listen to that in a minute. But that first part was him basically dismissing that obviously false claim that, you know, if Russia wins in Ukraine, which it obviously is going to win Ukraine, that then it'll move into to NATO and eventually it'll come to the gates of Washington DC, right? It's just nonsense. Like, you know, the Russian hordes will be at our gates and stuff. Like, it's just bullshit. Like, fuck's sakes, it's just so tiring. But if you go back to the bit I was talking about was actually jump forward to just 2 minute mark there.
I had the naive notion that the whole world, including the so-called civilized one, understood that Russia had become a completely different country, that ideological confrontation no longer existed, and therefore there was no basis for confrontation. When there was something negative about Russia in Western policy, I naively thought that it was just inertia of thinking. They are used to fighting the Soviet Union and continue to do so out of inertia. I thought it had to do with the energy of movement. That was a naive notion. The reality is, and I am 100% convinced of it, that after the collapse of the Soviet Union, they thought that such a large country was not necessary, that it was better, as Brzezinski, a well-known US politician, suggested, to divide it into 5 parts and subjugate them separately, so that these parts would have no independent weight, no voice, no opportunity to defend their national interests as the unified Russian state does. This realization came to me only later, and that is why the initial approach was rather naive.
How can common ground be found when accusations are flying in from all sides?
They will have to find common ground with us, because they will have to reckon with us.
So
that's been, for the record, that's been furiously fact-checked in the West.
What?
That anyone in any position of authority in the United States ever claimed that Russia should be broken up into pieces. It was attributed first to Madeleine Albright in the 90s. There was a quote, and it was cited a few times, and then I've tried to re-find it, and I don't find it online ever again. He said just there that Brzezinski I said it once, into 5 units specifically.
Yeah, I remember that. I remember reading about that
one of
before.
his book? Maybe it's in his grand chessboard book.
Yeah. I think it was definitely policy, you know. That was their plan. You saw what they did to Russia in the 90s. They came into Russia, they thought, follow the Soviet Union, they thought, okay, like, this is over. We've won the Cold War. Russia, the Soviet Union has collapsed, and now's the time to make this country more manageable. Just like, obviously, it would be in their thinking, like, we don't want a kind of a secular, non-communist kind of state to rise up over this massive territory with all its resources and its population. We need to split it up. We need to balkanize it. They've done it in the Balkans, right? So it's official. It's standard operating procedure for the American empire to, when the opportunity arises and it's appropriate, to break up a country into parts to make it more manageable.
That's obvious to us and Putin now in hindsight. That wasn't something he learned through the 90s.
No. But I'm saying
it took 2 and some terms
for him
to go.
But that's what he was just saying. That's what he was actually explaining there. Was
only in the last decade.
That he was naive to think, he thought that the negativity and the the snarkier remarks and attacks against Russia in, let's say, the early 2000s after he came to, after he was first president.
We're just
that
inertia.
just inertia from
Hangovers of the Cold War.
Yeah, they still were thinking of Russia as the Soviet Union, and that it would just give them some time and they'd come around. But then he realized that no, these people are serious. They actually had a plan. What they wanted to happen was that Russia should not be allowed to be a single unified country. We need to break it up into 5 pieces.
Yeah.
And because that's how you rule the world, right? You can't have one major competitor or 1 or 2 major competitors. If you can avoid it, you avoid it at all costs.
It speaks to that also presumably being the template for China with breaking up ideally Tibet and then eventually the Xinjiang as well into smaller manageable pieces. Hong Kong, of course, they're keeping the fires. So, yeah, it makes sense now. It makes sense now that we and many people are now informed about geopolitics, but we have to learn about geopolitics in the fulcrum of experience.
It doesn't take you long, to realize when you look at America's attitude towards ruling the world. It doesn't take you long to realize that these people want to rule the world, and they'll try to do it by force,
Any means possible,
by whatever way they can. Yeah. This one is another example of just it's even talking about the will of the people. More Ukrainians, the picture. Just click on it there. More Ukrainians are ready for territorial concessions to Russia, according to a poll. I think the idea is that it's at most.
But that is something that the Russians are probably watching for timing.
Yeah. As well.
When we go in, how ready are they for this?
Right.
Because we don't want... You can imagine that was part of what they did the first time.
Mm-hmm.
They sent a lot of forays deep in, and they got some pushback. And that kind of shaped maybe to what extent they were going to...
There's also the military angle, it's more important. But yes, the social angle as well, how the population... But people tire of wars. It kind of two go together, after a certain period of time in a conflict. And if you're the nation that's been, in this case, invaded, the process, the timing and the process of attriting your forces down, if it goes that way, where you as a host country, host of the invasion, where your military forces are depleted down to the point where an invasion, a real proper invasion, can happen. At that point as well, a lot of the population are tired of the conflict. Do you know what I mean? And depending on how the invading force presents itself, they're much more willing to give things up.
I'll tell you what. When I saw the next item, I thought they're ready. Any day now, they're ready. This incident, you probably saw a video of this. This went viral. This is somewhere in western Ukraine, a small town. Yeah. And actually, the guy who walked in on this meeting, which was being recorded, was himself a member of the board. He's a councillor, locally elected official. He walks in, the meeting's already underway, it's a bit tense, who knows what's going back and forth, probably something to do with conscription or subsidies or lack of whatever they don't have somewhere in western Ukraine at the moment. He set off 3 hand grenades.
Just tossed them on the floor, yeah.
Just tossed them on the floor. He himself bore the worst of it. He may have expected to die. He's a vet, so he's fought in the front line.
Not happy.
Not happy. Murder-suicides among vets are notorious, especially after a war zone. A lot of people who lived through and survived the wars in the Balkans in the 1990s said they remember this because the vets would have often guns, but also grenades to go home with as souvenirs, and a lot of them were set off, usually because of some grievance, or they just snap, PTSD. So Ukraine it's about ready. It's about cooked. It's about ready for unregime changing. Let's say, given that the Americans have pole position in claiming to have regime changed it already. There's something else about Russia. Well, there's always something about Russia, but it's just kind of tangential, isn't it? Talking about Congress and looking ahead to next year, the thing you sent me that about this bill to prevent any future president from taking the U.S. out of NATO.
Yeah.
That was such a tell, wasn't it? Here it is from the Hill. As you said, obviously this is to do with Trump. It gives you an idea of how what we talked about last week when Robert Kagan piped up in the Washington Post and said, "Look, guys, Trump is going to win next year." How seriously they're taking this this likelihood. Congress approves bill barring any president from unilaterally withdrawing from NATO. It sounds so neutral when you just read the title, but below they admit that it's about Trump. It's basically,
the
obviously,
only
to
one.
this point, the commander-in-chief can decide foreign policy. Thank you very much. But they changed the ruling so that Congress has to vote by 2/3 majority to remove from NATO.
Right.
Trump, I imagine Trump would just
Which
ignore
tells
that
that
anyway.
the majority of Congress is in support of
Probably-
NATO, which is, basically America's imperial structure
And major
overseas.
and money laundering scheme for kickbacks and
It's just a war machine.
so yeah, and what's also mentioned actually, this is like it. Look at that title again. Congress approves bill. It sounds like the normal workings of somebody proposed a bill and then the members discussed it on the floor and it went for a first reading and second reading. No bullshit. It's not a bill. It's a clause, a paragraph inserted inside the effing NDAA, the National Defense Authorization Act, which has been rolling for 17 years. It passed again this week. The endless gift that keeps on giving. And every year they just tack shit into it. This is another one. I don't know how. This is why Matt Gaetz rails about omnibus bills, where they stack, the bill, the actual law is just this one, the NDAA, and it's reauthorization, and it's so large they have to bring it in, and the paper stacks up at the ceiling. No one reads it, of course. So that you can just insert a clause in there, and boom, the next president, Trump, can't get the U.S. to leave NATO. Sorry, it's in the law. We just slipped it in last night in this huge stack of papers. Gates is right. I mean, you can't keep going like that. That's not democracy. There's no oversight whatsoever. No one gets to read it.
Yeah.
Special interest, literally write the paragraph, get a staffer to get the senator to sign, okay, thank you. Here's your promise, here's your campaign contribution for next year, and it's just stuck in the stack of papers. That's not a bill, it's not a law, it's pure lobbying. Not even lobbying. Lobbying makes it seem semi-clean. It's buying. It's the total subversion of the normal due process. That the people elect representatives and the representatives propose laws and pass them. The representatives weren't even involved, apart from a signature. They didn't even read it. Next thing, they learned it on the Hill like the rest of us. Oh, did I just sign for that last night? Well, I'll be damned. That's it. They're like outside. They're outside looking in as all the rest of us. Anyway, speaking of bullshit papers, COP28. That's amazing. It's amazing. It's the best thing ever. Huge deal. Huge deal. Like clown shoes. The way they can get so excited about this. I think I know what's going on. I think I have some idea at least why they kind of feign excitement whenever there's a great, international global agreement and the agenda is saved. COP28, landmark summit takes direct aim at fossil fuels. That's the headline they wanted to get. The whole talking shop was geared towards just being able to get the BBC and all the other mainstream outlets with that headline. Of course, the BBC does its part. It puts in a picture of a raging forest fire. Scroll down. Nations at the United Nations Climate Summit have for the first time, taken explicit aim at the use of fossil fuels.
With what? With like weapons or missiles?
No, Joe, pens.
Oh, with pens.
Pens.
No, with words, Neil.
Words even. The talks in Dubai came close to collapse, but in a dramatic turnaround, nations agreed to, quote, transition away from coal, oil and gas.
Transition away. It departed from earlier, stronger language to phase out fossil fuels. So we're going to transition away.
Not phase out. That's the only thing that changed.
Yeah, that's important. That's an important distinction, because, when I transition away from something, it's good. It means I'm moving away, but kind of slowly. But if I was to phase out from something, well, that's got phases, right? So I suppose the key here is the difference between transitions and phases. Because if you phase out fossil fuels, it still implies that there's phases to the removal, essentially complete removal of them. But transitioning away, it means you can still see the fossil fuels, right? You're just a bit further away from them than you were.
They begin to recede.
Yeah, because phase out is kind of like would be closer to extinguish, So you're not going to extinguish fossil fuels completely. You're not going to put out the flame of fossil fuels, but you're just going to step away from the fire a little bit.
Yeah.
Remove yourself, take a few steps back.
Yeah.
And that's really, really important. That wording is really important because it means now that everybody will be transitioning away rather than phasing out, which is significant. It's significant. And we're going to see the real world effects of this very, very soon.
Yeah, we are, sure. These tossers.
They're very excited though. About
they're going to save the planet because of this phrase. Scroll down a bit more. Remember, this began a couple of weeks ago when, of course, it's hosted by the UAE, an petrodollar major oil producing country. Onlookers' fear of a conflict of interest seemed confirmed when leaked documents suggested that Mr. Jaber, who represents the UAE, had planned to use the presidency to strike business deal.
Oh my God!
Of course he did.
Like business deals involving fossil fuels.
But his boss, the minister in the UAE, had said at the outset in his speech, or maybe it was just in comments in a press conference after. Anyway, it got attention in the West. He's like, if we're not phasing out fossil fuels, otherwise we'll all be returning to living in the caves.
Yeah.
And that prompted Al Gore to throw a hissy fit.
And it said it was disaster. Yeah, it's kind of like what actually was going on over that with the guy, the president of it, the guy from the UAE. It's like he was at an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting and he was selling beers out the back. You know what I mean? So
they're all drinking beers. The point is, they're supposed to reach. It's pantomime. The understanding is you reach the last day and we all clap and cheer on an agreed
for the
phrasing.
media, for the news.
It's so that the BBC
the
and the New York Times and CNN can make those headlines and say back to us. The target here is the Western audience. They need validation from outside the other 7 billion people and all those other countries in Eurasia and Asia and Africa and everywhere else in Latin America. The Western leaders need their validation just enough to get the wording on the paper so that it's reflected back to us Westerners that the whole world is behind this.
Yeah, that we're all going this
but
direction.
It's not.
So don't be
head
surprised.
of the country hosting this event says it's not happening or we'll all be living in the caves. He basically...
But the message has been delivered by the BBC there that don't be surprised when there's no more petrol or diesel at the station, right? When
That's
you go to fill up your
another
car.
one, yeah.
It's get everybody, like you said, it's aimed at the population. It's aimed at the population to get them on board with the idea of
Shortages, blackouts,
or whatever needs to be done. But that we're going away. You're not going to have any more petrol or diesel or industry.
Yeah. The opening, well, besides the host, the opening speech was again given to King Charles, and he said again. Paraphrasing something similar to what Macron said. Did he say it during the pandemic that the age of abundance is over? Just declared it. When Macron said it wasn't connected with anything. At least when Charlie here said it, he said it in context of climate change. It made some kind of sense to people in narrative makings. But That's the message. It's like they're declaring it's happening.
Mm-hmm.
Get used to it. And this, people maybe go too far with saying, oh, they're actually going to stop mining, drilling for and shipping oil around the world deliberately. That's not actually happening. If you look at, like, there's charts this week showing the amount of imports of Russian oil alone into the European Union, it's going up and up and up and up. The actual consumption hasn't changed at all. These people just need narratives. They need the appearance that this is the way it's going in preparation for an eventuality where there really are shortages. And so people have a go-to to explain why they are without food, fuel, transport, etc.
Yes.
They're hoping this stays that prevents people from turning on their governments and blaming them for it. You know, it wasn't us, it was the climate.
Yeah. There's, I mean, it's just, again, we're not joking when we say that the whole thing's clown shoes. So you have COP26 talking about, announcing this great achievement of transitioning away from fossil fuels, but apparently, and maybe that's just for us, I suppose it's just for us, because Political this week had an article, and this isn't new either, we've talked about this before, about how about them sanctions, the anti-Russian sanctions, where they're going to stop Russia from, they're going to stop Russia from selling its oil and gas and stuff. Well, sanctions aren't working, apparently. How the West enables Russia's war on Ukraine. So the EU is pointing the finger at Chinese suppliers, but it's Western companies that make the most critical components used in Russia's arsenal of weapons. So there's that, and on top there's another one. Do I have it here? The fact we were talking about it during the week about the Russian oil deliveries arriving at the Pentagon, basically. The Pentagon receiving large quantities of Russian oil to fuel the American military machine, I suppose, because they're basically
it's the single
shipping
biggest
in
consumer of energy on the earth.
They're shipping in part, not only from Russia, but in part from Russia. They're shipping in Russian oil into the Pentagon and then flying it back over to Ukraine to put it into Ukrainian or American weapons or European weapons that the Ukrainians use to fight against the Russians. All the while saying that we're sanctioning Russia and we're putting a cap on Russian oil and blah, blah, blah. It's just, the whole thing was nonsense from the get-go.
Yeah.
They knew it. They all knew it. And it's all propaganda. It's all just for public consumption. Oh my God. The cynicalness, the cynicism, of these people is, it's just mind-blowing. Gaza.
I've an opening one that puts it in chronology. So I complained last week that it had been 9 freaking weeks and the Israelis still had nothing on who, how many, and how people died on October 7th. They have finally said something. Took the time. 10 weeks. Super dodgy. After 10 weeks, the Israeli government has declared an actual death toll from October 7th. It's lower, around 1,200, but it's close to what they had said last, around 1,200. It's not opening.
I have it here, actually, I think. Well, it's from the same source.
I got it from Yahoo News.
Oh, yeah? Okay.
It's open for me here, but the Yahoo, just aggregates. They got it from AFP, so yeah, it's the official word on it. I think the final toll is something like 1,369 people.
1-1.
1-1.
1,139.
Right, less than
1,139. So they've revised it down. This is from New Arab News. New Arab News. So total supposedly death toll from the attack in terms of civilians is 695, as well as 373 security forces, 71 foreigners, and that's a total of 1,139. So they revised it down from initial 14 to 1,200, now to 1,139. most of those people, most of the civilians, probably all of the civilians, give or take, but large majority of the civilians were killed by the Israelis themselves, because, as we've mentioned before, this was very likely a kind of an inside job, a setup to justify what Israel has wanted.
Finally,
Create a final solution, push forward to the final solution to the Palestinian problem, and they needed their biblical event, as one guy called it, or their catastrophic and galvanizing event in order to justify doing what they've been doing for the past 2 months. Well, is it 2 months yet? Yeah, more or less.
I have it now. So it's a breakdown of who was killed and how they did it, on what basis they're saying. So this is the original AFP one. Okay, scroll down. Okay, the final death toll of civilians is 695.
Mm-hmm.
That's a far cry from 1,400 they were implying. Whatever. Includes 36 children. Foreigners giving a total of 1139. Okay. Okay, scroll down. You probably need to go all the way down to social, under the subheading Social Security figures. So they did it by basically finally actually checking their own Social Security database. The biggest takeaway from this is that if you keep scrolling, even the AFP mentions this. This is why they're in such, even like in Washington, London, and Paris, they're in serious trouble here, or at least they would be anyway if it was any other country, because of their initial claims. Okay, keep scrolling. I'm not sure what I'm looking for here. I think it's the, yeah. Okay. They give some examples of the names of kids killed. They write, the data gives a clear picture of the scale of the atrocities, okay, but it also invalidates some statements by Israeli authorities in the days following the attack. In particular, remember, 40 babies murdered at a kibbutz.
Mm-hmm.
AFP is basically saying it's bullshit. Didn't happen. Their own data now finally confirms that was fake news. Another testimony called into question the claim by an IDF colonel who told a group of journalists that he personally transported a, quote, decapitated baby found in the arms of his mother in the Be'eri kibbutz. Bullshit, because only one baby, we now know it was killed in the Be'eri kibbutz. 10-month-old Mila Cohen, whose mother survived. And then the AFP tries to give an explanation. Well, you see, trauma and misinterpretation.
Yeah.
It's been 10 weeks. It's traumatic. In the heat of the moment, people just, they get some things wrong. Come on. It was 3 weeks after that they finally brought in international journalists, or maybe 2 weeks, into some of these places. And they calmly and methodically told them they had civilian rescuers, the Israeli version of the ambulance service, first responders, give presentations to the journalists and say, yeah, I was in this house over here just down the street. Oof, 10 dead babies, one in an oven, stuff like that. Basically, a shitload of people lied through their teeth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was the whole thing is carefully choreographed and stage managed event. It was mass murder of Israelis by Israelis in order to justify what Israel has wanted to do for 20 plus years, had plans to do for 20 plus years, and they couldn't do it because obviously the plan is what you're seeing happen right now, which is the mass destruction of Palestine, the rest of Palestine and the Palestinian people. They've wanted their final solution, and I'm not using that term lightly, or I'm not using it disingenuously. I think it is exactly the same as the way the term was used originally in Nazi Germany. It was a final solution to then it was the Jewish problem, as they said, or the minorities problem. And now it's the final solution to the Palestinian problem, and it's the Israeli Jews that are carrying it out. So, I mean, that's just the reality of the situation, you know. I mean, we've been, you know, immersed in this reality in that sense, or confronted with this reality for a very long time, and on many different other topics, or many other events that have happened over the years that are quite clearly kind of inside jobs of one type or another. And it's very simple. I mean, when a government like Israel has wanted to destroy the Palestinian people but had no justification for doing it, needed to create the justification itself. It's not fucking rocket science. Sorry for my French there. French language is full of very bad words in English, but it's not rocket science. It's very simple, and it's cold, calculating, but that's how politicians, and especially psychotypes, operate. They simply say, listen, we need a bunch of dead Israelis. We need a large number of dead Israelis in order to justify killing 20, 30, 40 times as many Palestinians and bringing a solution to this problem. So, well, how are we going to do that? Well, Hamas is going to have to, quote unquote, kill all these people. But they're not able to do that, sir, because they don't have the means even to get out of Gaza, really, and wage any effective campaign outside of Gaza, because we have this fence and there's no way they can get out. We're going to have to facilitate them getting out, and then we're going to have to... But then the problem, sir, with that is that Hamas, generally speaking, doesn't go around killing civilians. It'll attack our soldiers and kill our soldiers, etc., but it won't, generally speaking, cause mass murder amongst the civilian population, because, well, like any group in their position throughout history, at least through modern history, they realise that that's a very bad idea, in terms of, because they rely heavily on international support for their plight and their oppression, and therefore if they're seen to be a bunch of mass murderers of civilians, then they're going to lose all that support. So generally speaking, they don't kill civilians. Well, in that case, then we're going to have to kill the civilians. And in the fog of war type situation, and with our media and with our statements, we can easily make it look like they did it. We'll provide the evidence. So we get some kind of death squad to come in there, or you know, members of the Israeli military or some kind of paramilitary group from somewhere that comes in and just slaughters a bunch of people at this rave, and in the kibbutzes we can get several hundred people dead that way, and we'll pin it on Hamas. And then before the shoe is even dropped, we're going to be straight into Gaza, and we're going to finally get to do what we want to do for so long. It's very simple. And
have you? Is it hyperbole or not that this is the worst military action? I'm afraid I don't even know if I can call it a war, because a war is between two armies,
two states. Hamas isn't a state.
Is this the worst ever? I mean, do you know of anything like this in history? For example, in modern history, you watch closely day by day the Iraq War. Yeah. How does this compare?
Yeah, it doesn't compare, and it doesn't compare for. I mean, there's been very many similar type things have been done in modern history, but not. The difference in this situation is that it's being done flagrantly in front of everyone's faces, and it's being done by, you know, openly, without any apologies, without any attempt to restrain themselves, and done while flipping the bird at the entire world public opinion by a supposed Western democracy in the Middle East. America's best friend, best friend of European democracies, who they all support, and they're basically mass murdering civilians in front of everybody's face, and everybody gets to see it. Previous events was done in obscurity. There was no video. There was no video of it, but they're doing it openly. Yeah, they seem to want to do it. They seem to want to challenge people. It's an attempt to
normalize it.
To normalize it, and an attempt to kind of pull people to the dark side in a certain sense, not to be dramatic, but to corrupt people's sense of morality and conscience by getting them to accept that this is okay because of what they did to us. And to the extent that anybody does that and thinks that it's okay, or that it's, well, that's just how things happen and Israel has a right to defend itself, blah, 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 they're corrupting people's consciences the extent that they're able to do that with anybody. But the lines seem to be fairly well drawn. There's just people out there who have a conscience, and it's not going to go away anytime soon. And there are people out there who have never had a conscience, and they're the ones who are supporting Israel. They're also extremely ignorant and stupid people. And they're PhDs, they're professors, they're etc.
Or
They're
RFK Jr.
yeah, all of them
What the hell?
extremely ignorant, stupid people.
Bobby, no.
Yeah.
This week
So-
it seems to get worse every week. This week we have footage of Israeli IDF bulldozers bulldozing people into the ground. Supposedly there were people in tents taking shelter outside another hospital, and the bulldozer just either killed them, or maybe they were already corpses.
It's hard to know, but definitely
in that case, it's
bodies.
desecration.
They were live or dead bodies bulldozed.
There's an Al Jazeera
don't know.
report of an IDF massacre of, well, I don't know how many, but of some amount of civilians taking shelter in a school in northern Gaza. Don't know if we want to play that. It was only a dozen people. I mean, how do you pick out which atrocities to draw attention to? There more journalists have been targeted.
They killed 3 of their own hostages this week. Three
Yeah.
soldiers who were taken hostage and had been hostages since October 7th.
Were they soldiers?
Yep.
Jesus Christ. They were waving white flags, shouting,
Partially
"Don't shoot,"
undressed.
in Hebrew.
Yeah, and they, but I mean, you got to question whether or not that's maybe, but depending on the position they were in and whether they could get to them or not. There's the Hannibal directive, right, where that might come into play there, where you basically just kill those guys anyway, because if there's a chance that they're about to be retaken or recaptured, then you just kill them. You know what I mean? If basically any of these Israeli hostages come out, right, if they somehow manage to escape from their tunnels wherever they're being held, if the IOF, the Israeli Occupation Forces, are able to get them, then that's all the good. But if it looks like they can't get them, if they're going to be recaptured, then, and if the opportunity arises, the Israeli military will, under the Hannibal directive, kill those people, because that's second best to actually getting the hostages home. Is there being dead hostages?
Yeah.
The Israeli government and the military, maybe not the rank and file military, but the military command and the Israeli government don't care about the hostages. They want them back home or dead as soon as possible. However they die, it doesn't matter. If they were able to identify where the bulk, I'm sure the hostages aren't being kept together. There's maybe 100 or 100 plus left. They're not all being kept in the same place, which makes it difficult. If they were all in the same place, and the Israeli government and military found out about it, they would happily bomb that location to kill them all. Because then that whole hostage thing is just, it's a pain in the ass, and it's off our backs now. We don't have to worry about it anymore. We can just, we don't have to pander to Israeli public opinion anymore. We don't have to go carefully and.
This killing of 3 of their own sparked more protests in Tel Aviv.
Yeah.
It's an alien mindset.
It is. Yeah.
Speaking of aliens, I can't get my head around it. So
they're just psychopaths, basically.
It's bonkers. I just sent you a photo. People have seen this, I'm sure. I want to discuss it for a second. Who's publishing these? I presume it's the Israelis themselves. This is last week. There were a few similar images. You remember they were rounding up guys on the streets, blindfolded, in their cacks. Where the whole world's told they're Hamas. They're taken to a pit, a sand pit like this. This is from this week, and the kind of implied message is, and then we shot them. They didn't, as I mentioned last week. They did actually return most of them, I guess, back to wherever they picked them up. So this is an even larger group of people. I presume they're mostly male, but they may not be all male. There were definitely women in the trucks last week.
Look at the guy with the
what's going on in the foreground?
Well,
I first thought it was a doctored image, but
it's all being filmed, as we've seen.
He's got lights.
It's propaganda.
He's setting up lights for filming. Somebody ID'd 1 or 2 of those guys in the foreground. One is a doctor, taken from one of the hospitals. They've done more propaganda stuff. They went into a hospital and they claimed they opened up an incubator type machine device for babies, and claimed they found explosives in it. They published that image. The whole thing is set up like you've got the kind of sandbar, that's what you do. And when you line people like against me, you shoot them. That's
Yeah.
what it's for. It's a shooting range, so that when the bullets miss them, they don't go willy-nilly. They hit the
in a way,
they're conveying that
it's
image.
a temporary holding. They are, but it's a temporary holding area as well. It makes it easier for them to, to see anybody trying to escape, right?
Right.
But no, I'm not saying that
No,
that what it implies, because certainly they're capable of doing it. They have absolutely no respect at all for Palestinian life, and they see it less than animals, basically, and that's just exposes them as the actual animals. But the problem is, well, there's two things. One is, I think I sent it to you. There it is again, Scotty. You can put that one up. This sums up the attitude of Palestinians towards the whole situation. Have a read.
وحضلني على أرض صامدة لآخر نقطة دم في روحي لآخر نفس فيا لما يعني خلص هيك يبطل فيا نفس أنا خنق أموت بعديها بندفن حتى في أرضي بندفن تحت الزراعة في أرضي بدي أزرع أنا
ما بدك تسيبي أرضك بالمرة
بالمرة
رغم إنك هلأ كتير بردانة ويمكن جوعانة وما في أدوية والوضع صعب برضو مش هتطلعي؟
برضو مش هطلع حضرنا صامدين
هالقد بتحبي فلسطين؟
هالقد أطفال فلسطين ما بتخلوش عنها زي ما حكت الأغنية أنا دمي فلسطيني أنا دمي فلسطيني.
So little warrior.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think she echoes the sentiments of the vast majority of Palestinians that they're not going anywhere, and Israel can kill them all if it wants, if it's allowed to, if the world allows Israel to kill them all, mass murder, genocide, then go ahead. But we're not going anywhere, and it's not unique to Palestinians, that sentiment.
They're going hungry now.
When it comes to land, it's not unique to Palestinians. That sense of I don't care, I'll die here.
Yeah.
I'm not bowing down. I'm not running away in the face of this kind of psychopathy and evil. I'm not being pushed out of where I live, my homeland. I'm staying here, and you can do whatever you want, and I'll fight. I'll fight with every.
I'll fight if I can. If I can't fight, I'll still stay.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
It
It doesn't matter. So, and of course, then you have the psychos in Israel, who are, it's kind of like an unstoppable force and an immovable object in a certain sense, although hopefully the Israelis are an unstoppable or a stoppable force somehow or other. But like Netanyahu this week said that Israel doesn't care about international support or public opinion and will pursue, declared its determination on Wednesday to press on with its Gaza war with or without international support. So, and then on top of that, you have...
Which is bluff, because he can't do anything without Washington.
Yeah, which means that he knows that he should be pretty sure that
he can rely on
that he'll rely on that support anyway. Although, this week also, just a few days ago, a diplomat, in fact, a French diplomat in the French foreign ministry, it was actually in a residential house, that house was targeted, and the French citizen, I suppose, and he actually works for the foreign ministry. The French foreign ministry was killed on a residential house in southern Gaza.
Wow, that's interesting.
And then France has called for, as a result of that, we presume France has called for an immediate ceasefire. Huh?
He's dead.
Yeah,
this is news today.
Yeah,
crazy. Now
so France today called for a ceasefire, which other countries haven't done yet. That's the first time a European country has called, or one of the main European countries have called for an immediate
Belgium
ceasefire.
and Spain, their leaders were there outside Rafah 2 weeks ago, saying likewise. Rafah is, of course, as far south from Gaza as you get. It's on the border with Egypt.
This is where you're meant to go.
Remember the AI oversight the Israelis have. That's probably not accidental.
No.
That's a message to France. That was targeted. Crazy.
That they don't care.
They don't care. Here's another video from this week. You've all seen the destruction in the north of Gaza from the airstrikes in the first few weeks. So this is an area long since. There's no one here. Go ahead and play that. But this week, there's no Hamas to clear out. There's no residents, no civilians, nothing. They went in and they demolished. I don't think that's an overhead strike. I think that's demolitions over a huge quarter and a half. They demolished what they've already destroyed.
Mm-hmm.
And that reminded me that, like, you know, if they're serious, there are noises, like serious noises from in Israel proper, that there's an agenda to level this place and get it rebuilt ASAP and fill it with Israelis. So an Israeli MP apparently confirmed this week. She's a member of some far-right nutter group. I don't remember their names. Settler herself says she told Israeli media she'd been in talks with Netanyahu and he agreed with her that it's imperative. Her name is Limor Son, the weird name, Limor Son Har Melech. She told Israeli media that we need to get Israelis in there building as fast as possible. Like that's the urgency, to get the facts on the ground before anyone can stop them. And then I saw this. It's all in Hebrew, so we have to take the poster's interpretation of what it says at face value. I think we'll see that he is himself either Israeli or Jewish, so he probably can read Hebrew. He's got a series of posts. Early this week, a coalition of settler organizations held the Practical Preparation for Gaza Settlement Conference. Okay, scroll down. Following the conference, ads were taken out stating, quote, "Gaza is the land of Israel. Fight, liberate, settle." That's the slogan, apparently, on that piece of comms from this organization or this conference. Those interested are invited to call a registration hotline for re-established settlements in Gaza. Okay, next one. Hare Zahav, a settlement development enterprise, is advertising for Gaza settlements. Quote, "A house on the beach is not a dream. We have begun clearing rubble and fencing off squatters." And there they have a rough sketch-up, mock-up of an architect's design for beachfront villas. Mm-hmm. I mean, the shitheads didn't even bother airbrushing out what remains of the ruins. They just went ahead and started overlaying the fucking designs of what they envisaged this is going to look like. And actually, there's one more which goes the full Monty, I think, the full glossy brochure. They've got there. Maybe that's a mock-up and not a specific actual layout for a town, but you can see how serious and advanced this is. This is the conversation they're having. The rest of the world's having a totally different conversation. This is what they're talking about in Israel. Mm-hmm. At least some of them. I don't want to generalize all of them, but maybe scroll down. Is there one more? There should be maybe one more glossy image. No, that's the end of it. So, yeah. Okay, so it's the end of the year. What's happening next? Times of Israel reported that Israel is definitely preparing for war with Hezbollah. I.e., we're going to do to Hezbollah what we just did. We're pushing them back 30 kilometers to the Litani River. And by Hezbollah, they mean every living thing, of course, probably. Now, you might say, yeah, well, that's been rumored and on the cards, obviously, since day one. Hezbollah are engaged with Israel. But on the back of Israel's national security advisor stating this, and the Times of Israel reporting it in international media last week. Here's another one in the Hill. This is an op-ed written by a dual Israeli-American neocon type guy. Works for some think tank pro-Israel, maybe AIPAC. America must plan for Israel's likely 2024 war with Hezbollah. I.e., it's happening and we're dragging America into it.
Yeah, Happy New Year. The Litani River is pretty far back. It's about from the actual border between Israel and Lebanon. It's about 40 kilometers, you know. And there's a lot of people there. So yeah, you can't push people back behind the Litani River without some major, large-scale conflict, you know.
Yeah. In the meantime, it's still just the Houthis. And I don't know. I don't know how much people have stills of videos of ships on fire. The Houthis claim they hit this and that.
There's
ship.
definitely one cargo.
There's some pushback. Maersk, was once, maybe not anymore, the largest shipping company on the earth, has ordered all its container ship traffic to bypass the Red Sea and go all the way down Africa, up to Europe and North America. So that right there is you're gonna feel that in your shipping delays.
In your
in the coming month.
Amazon deliveries.
Oh yes. So that's having some effect. It's dodgy though. They're keeping a lid on it. I think the Houthis are doing only when they produce videos themselves of landing on the decks of ships and commandos getting out of helicopters do we actually see that they're not just talking smack. They're doing some actions, but there's some kind of like dome of silence placed over the whole thing by Israel and the United States.
Yeah.
And it's open to interpretation right now. You can say, oh, that's because the Houthis are really, really having an effect. And for propaganda purposes, they just want to airbrush it out. Or it's not really, and they're just biding their time with which to use it to justify either smacking Yemen proper or getting Saudi Arabia to restart its war there. Yeah, 2024. The Middle East is going to catch fire to some extent or another. It's going to be mental.
Do you remember what we just watched earlier on? Putin talking about in the first part of that interview, where he talked about Finland.
Yeah.
And he said specifically the West took Finland and dragged it into NATO. Why did we have any disputes with Finland? All disputes, including those of a territorial nature in the middle of the 20th century, have all been resolved long ago. There were no problems, but now there will be because we will now create the Leningrad military district there and definitely concentrate military units there. So we're going to have to do that. But this, if you go back to the headline, that's how CNN reported that. Now, how does the average person, when they read that headline, interpret that? Oh, that Putin and his warmongering again, right?
Yeah.
It's true what the government has been saying, that we need to stop Putin in Ukraine because otherwise once he wins in Ukraine, he's going to come into European countries, right?
He's going to attack NATO.
Yeah, so they
specifically Finland,
dragged into.
who we just put into NATO.
Right, exactly. And he explained it. He said, "Listen, they put Finland into NATO. There's no problems. We had resolved all territorial disputes, and now they go on and join NATO and build and put weapons on our border in Finland. So we're going to have to respond to that." Right, which is, i.e., this is not what we wanted. You forced this on us. You're being aggressive towards us. But the CNN headline is, Putin warns of problems with neighbouring Finland. I'm going to get those Finns. That's what Putin says. So it's so disingenuous.
Yeah. He's trying to recreate the old Russian Empire, bring Finland back into it.
Yeah.
Blah, blah, blah.
So
they love him, really. Do you know that? Look at him.
What would they do without him?
He's so lovable. What would they do without him or Trump, actually? This might be a sign of the times. In fact, I guarantee you it is. Mark Zuckerberg. Get ready for it. He's preparing to go back underground.
What rock did he crawl out from under? Doomsday bunker.
Mark Zuckerberg building Doomsday bunker. He's a liberal.
Why would you
he
do
apparently
that?
believes in the end times.
Before they started working on a 100 million family compound, it would include
In Hawaii.
5,000 square foot underground bunker featuring an escape hatch and tunnel leading to 2 connecting mansions. Well, he looks like he came from underground, so he's just gone back to his natural habitat. In Hawaii.
While in the U.S. Senate, celebrations on the 17th annual passing of the so-called Democratic NDAA were underway when a staffer was caught filming gay porn in one of the chambers. All very normal.
Wonderful, wonderful people they employ, those Democratic senators. That's a bit of diversity there. He's up in his diversity quotient, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
God bless America. God love America. Turquoise natural habitat underground, exactly.
Tucker Carlson's been interviewing everyone these days.
Mhm.
Alex Jones did that,
Yeah.
get the
bullhorn on.
get the old 1776 will commence again going. I thought his most notable interview though was with Grush, David Grush. He's not really a whistleblower because he's still formally employed and he's doing everything by the book. I suppose he's a kind of a whistleblower. He's been talking lots lately, not just to Tucker, but with Joe Rogan.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the first time he mentioned it. He mentioned it in June, that first UFO crash retrieval. That's not in the UFO lore.
It is.
It is?
Yeah.
In northern Italy.
Yeah.
Okay. I thought everyone agreed it began with Roswell.
Yeah.
Post World War II. Apart
that's
from
'cause there were
there were
bodies and
sightings,
stuff.
but the first retrieval.
The first retrieval of a craft without there's no mention of any biologics, as they call them. It's just some artifact or some kind of part of a craft or something like that in Italy in 1933. But Roswell stood out because it was alleged to be those jelly like grey alien things.
Biologics.
The
That's new
biologics.
word were included, whereas
Yeah.
the one in Italy was just an.
They're like big
an
versions
anti-craft.
of those. You know, you get those things that you get for kids. It's like in the shape of a little man or something. You throw it at the ceiling and it
Yeah.
sticks. That's what the grey aliens are like. They're just bigger versions of that. Like
Yeah.
you throw them against the wall and they stick. Is that all you're going to say about the aliens then? Yeah.
Yeah.
The Tucker Carlson interviewing everybody and anybody. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, you remember Grush spoke to Congress twice
Yeah.
in June. It got a lot of attention, and there was people like, "Holy shit! They're taking this seriously." They seem to be. His hope was that by now, or whenever, Congress would pass, basically like a not full, it would never be full, but a substantial documents disclosure board would oversee the release of the bulk of the billions or however many documents the US has on this topic. Because Grush is motivated because he's seen enough to realize there's a whole architecture here within US government agencies and or private corps, contractors affiliated with the government. So he's satisfied that it's real, but he's like, I'm looking at this, a lot of this can just be published. It doesn't need to be, let's get it out there. So anyway, he was hoping that speaking to Congress in June and speaking to the media nonstop since then would generate momentum. And he got backers. He got Chuck Schumer to agree that the Democrats in the Senate would support basically setting up a JFK assassinations records type thing. I'm serious. That was what they agreed on paper. On paper, that's what they agreed to do.
Well,
that's since come to pass. It was tossed in with the same NDAA omnibus bill, but it's watered down. It's not disclosure law, and he's pissed off about it. He's been speaking to the press and saying, Bush is saying, I'm disappointed. It's not what
the JFK assassinations records was very successful, wasn't it? In outing the culprits, right?
Well, the bulk of it has been released by now.
Yeah,
but the key ones aren't.
There you go.
Exactly.
There's a precedent there for that kind of thing being a limited hangout,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you care what Elon Musk thinks about aliens?
In a kind of passing.
You'd think this
passing
guy,
kind of
a
way.
geeky kind of guy, he's into space, he's into tech, he's into spreading civilizations, sowing civilizations oats all over the place.
Yeah.
He'd be right up there, right?
Yeah.
With at least have an interest in it.
Yeah.
Apparently not. Maybe it's just one of his dissimulating things that he plays down when he knows. But for the record, his official word on it as of now is that humankind is most likely the only species in this part of the galaxy with a consciousness. Musk told an audience in Italy on Saturday, comparing our species to a, quote, tiny candle in a vast darkness.
Well, apparently not, but he'll be surprised.
The crazy thing is that I've seen no evidence of aliens whatsoever.
Right. What, like, as in one walking up to you and knocking on your door or something? Well, that's not the kind of evidence that we're talking about here, Alon.
It's very narrow.
Get with the
It's
program.
a very narrow. It reminds me of, like, I don't know, deGrasse Tyson, the mainstream astronomy take.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, well, it's a vast, vast universe, so it's possible, but nah. Like, dude, seriously? Are you not, like, watching what's going on with Grush and Tucker Carlson going, holy shit, there's something real to this? And many other figures, too. Some in the know, some just mainstream journalists who've turned sides on this and gone public with, well, gone public, they've talked to key people, and they take this seriously. You would think this guy who's so up on, you know, pushing the boundary on everything to expand what's acceptable in the mainstream.
Yeah, but he doesn't like it. It's too scary. He's scared.
I think he shows himself to be quite the
Yeah.
materialist
He is, obviously,
in this.
when you think about his colonized Mars and all that kind of stuff,
Yeah.
and we have to leave the planet, and also, he probably has a lot to lose if there's any, like, you know, alien along with their tech came along that blew his Teslas and his different technologies out of the water. Like they're direct competition, you know, so he doesn't want any competition. So he chooses not to believe in the competition. Anyway, we'll leave it there.
Yeah.
Yes.
Predictions for 2024.
More shite.
More shite. Well, more wars. We've said that's obviously going to happen.
General term for stuff that goes on this planet.
2024 election. Let's stick with Joe's.
No, I don't know if it's
prediction.
gonna be-
Hung election. Nobody gets it.
I think that might have gone that way, but I think it's going to be superseded by something else. There's going to be some kind of I don't know. I can't be sure. Another possibility, let's say, is that some kind of a major war in the Middle East spills over and creates, you know, some
Oil,
kind of a
energy
major
crisis.
crisis where continuity of government or whatever, something has to be suspended, elections have to be suspended for national security, something along those lines.
What's her name? Whitney Webb.
Yeah.
She's suggesting a cyber pandemic scenario is on the cards.
What's the cyber pandemic?
It's like
Viruses. infecting every computer?
COVID-19 tabletop exercises, but for the internet, and it powers down the grid briefly, and they restart everything, but it's central digital bank currencies and a new controlled internet where you have to be registered to your ID. You can't just be anon anymore for everything, commentary, purchases, paying bills, paying taxes, the whole shebang. But that's the architecture, the ideal they'd want, but maybe not all of that. She said the immediate urgency, impetus for it would be to help facilitate some shenanigans around the election.
So cyber
And or because she's found that so many Israelis have interest in the kind of tech involved here, and their obsession is with getting Iran. So justifying a cyber attack from Iran.
Yeah, but
I've
in
obviously
that
said
case,
a
then
lot
it's
there,
war in
but
the Middle East, like, you know what I mean?
that covers war in the Middle East. And
I mean, actual war, physical war in the Middle East is going to have a far bigger impact than some kind of cyber. And she should call it cyber 9/11, not cyber pandemic. A cyber 9/11.
I don't know. I'm not sure what she called it.
She called it cyber pandemic, but it should be cyber 9/11 basically, which is like an inside job.
Which is like 9/11 digitized to the power of 10.
shutting down the grid or whatever. But you know, a war in the Middle East could shut down, at least partially shut down the grid pretty soon as well, because of the grid ultimately runs on oil. You know.
Either way, it's economic.
Either way,
FUBAR.
Either way, we're talking about
It's like
doing
9/11 times.
times a million,
Yeah.
at least a million. Doom scroll. Just get your doom scrolling fingers. Your doom scrolling finger, you know, prepped for all the doom scrolling. You're gonna
After
have to
all
do
this year,
next
I need my finger needs like massage. Chiropractic.
Get your fingers massaged so you can doom scroll at light speed next year. Of course, you know, next year's a long enough time, so bit by bit. Anyway, we'll have to wait and see. But so yeah, we'll probably not be back unless some major doom happens between now and the end of the year. We'll probably not be back until the New Year. So it's like 2 Sundays from now. Well, that'll be the 31st. So we're talking about, are we going to be here on the 31st?
You might be.
Well, whatever, maybe. So we'll see. But yeah, we're on holidays. It's getting close to Christmas, and it's, you know, we need a holiday now and again. So yeah, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, have a good break. Hopefully, get a break. And thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Hope you enjoyed the show. We'll be back next week. No, we won't. We'll be back at some point in the future with another show after the holidays. Until then, have fun. See you
Merry
later.
Christmas. Thanks for watching. Bye,
Merry
everyone.
Christmas.
Can't stop the signal now.